My name is Dan Hayes, and I'm the pastor of Senior High Ministries here at Village Church, and I'm so glad to have this opportunity to share with you all this morning. Let's begin with a word of prayer. Oh Lord, it is so beautiful to come before you and sing and to hear the choir sing that song. And God, we love you, Jesus, and you are all that we need. God, I pray this morning you give us ears to hear, focus to pay attention, and God, convict us in a way where we leave here not just knowing more, but living more for you. We pray this in your name. Amen. Time is flying by, isn't it? Time is flying. You ever stop and wonder, where is all the time in my life going? What's happening with it? We're going to do a little experiment today. We're going to take your life, and for some of you, you're going to zoom up to the age of 70. Some of you are going to zoom down to 70. You're really going to like this experiment. But we're all going to get to the age of 70. The average person who lives to be 70 years old, this is how they're going to have spent their time. 20 years will have spent sleeping. That's the biggest chunk of our time. 16 years working. 7 years playing. We wish that was bigger. 6 years eating. 5 years dressing. 3 years waiting for somebody, like stoplights and stuff. 1.5 years here in church. 1 year on the telephone. Now, I think since these survey things came out, this is really skewed up because I'm pretty sure there's some teenagers that have already hit 1 year on the telephone by the age 18, so we may have to redo that one. 5 months spent tying your shoes. Wow. If you stop and think of that, at 70, we could go on, but those are just a beginning point. Where are you spending your time, and what is your time communicating about your priorities? This month, our theme is going to be about priorities, and you see that on the screen behind me. And there's kind of a double meaning here. Well, maybe we're not going to see that. There's a double meaning in this word priorities. There's just what are the priorities in your life, but when it comes up here, you'll see that we're taking the last few letters, ties, T-I-E-S, enlarging them, so it's prioritize. What are you tied to? How you spend your time shows what you are tied to. For some of us, we're tied to good things, but some of those good things are not the best things. So over this month, we're going to see what do we need to reorganize in terms of our priorities. Now we're going to begin just really briefly looking at the language from Hebrews 12. This really helps us in terms of the priorities theme. And it says this in Hebrews 12:1. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, now catch this, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. I love the really forceful language of the NLT where it says to let us strip off every weight that slows us down. It kind of gives some added oomph to that. It's the image of an athlete that's in training and saying, I want to take off anything. I want to get rid of anything that's hindering my performance, my athletic performance. And so we see in terms of our priorities, there's some things that we need to throw off. We need to untie, we need to release, we need to cut that rope, untie those. So that we can focus on more the best of the best of the best. And that's what we're going to be looking over the coming months. And here's the question we're going to hone in on today. How does your personal faith, how does your faith and the faith of your family as a whole rank in terms of your priorities? And not just what you say, because my faith ranks real high. Not just in what you say, but in how you actually live and how you actually spend your time. Now, growing up in a home that had a wood-burning stove and being a pretty avid outdoorsman, I like going camping and stuff. I know a little bit about chopping wood, so I brought in my trusty camp axe. You're wondering what the preacher is going to do with the axe. You better not fall asleep today when the senior high pastor's preaching. So we know with an axe, when you're out chopping wood, you want a really sharp blade. And so we're going to look at this image of having a razor sharp faith, and we want to have a sharpness on both sides with our faith. We need to have that. This needs to be a top priority. We cannot let our faith bump down the list. Oh, well, I'll take care of that later. I'm so busy in my life right now and all my schedule and my work. Unfortunately, that happens a lot. We bump our faith down. But today we're going to look at the two sides of the blade and how we can have a razor-sharp faith. And first we'll look at the first side of the blade. And the first side of the blade, we're going to focus in on Colossians 2 verses in verse 6 and 7. So in your Bibles, you can turn there. We'll have some verses on the projection too. I think, yes, we got it. On this side of the blade, this first side of razor-sharp faith, we have three big words. And it's the words, live it out. So that's what we're going to look at first. And so we'll look here at Colossians 2, reading in verse 6. So then, just as you received Christ Jesus as Lord, continue to live your lives in him. You can hear in these words in Colossians 2, the Apostle Paul urging these first century followers of Jesus to live it out. Paul had struggled much for these people. He'd poured so much into them, and he wanted to make sure that they didn't drift away from the Lord. So Paul shares what could be considered the core essentials of the Christian faith. And he first lays out a two-step process of what being a Christian is all about. So we're going to go through these two steps. The first step is this: to receive Christ, to choose to follow Jesus. You see that in the beginning of verse 6. So then, just as you received Christ Jesus as Lord. Now I have a picture up here of that's my firstborn son, Isaac, and some of the first steps that he was taking. You know, as a parent, like I just look back at that and I'm like, yeah, it's my boy. And my son, Levi, and my daughter, Elise, have all taken their first steps too. And we know as parents, we're so excited to see our kids take those first steps. And for us spiritually, the first step is just entering into the faith, deciding to follow Jesus. The verb here, received, was specifically used to denote the receiving of something that was delivered by tradition. We follow in the very tradition of Jesus Christ. It has been passed down to us over the generation and has come to us here today in 2014. So the first steps, like Isaac took his first steps, is to receive the decision to follow Jesus. But it doesn't stop there. There's a second step in the Christian life. We're called also to live it out continuously. The word here translated to continue to live has the force of walk or live or conduct yourself. Now, just like my kids, if you have received Jesus as your Lord, you've taken your first step. But can you imagine if I was like just pumped up, Isaac, man, you took your first walk, yeah. And I'm pumped, and I'm like, you know what, hey, son, first walk, first step, that's enough. Let's just stay with that one. You can just chill the rest of your life. And we know that's ridiculous. Like when you see one step, you want to see more and more steps. And that applies spiritually too. Just as we want our kids to walk more and eventually jump and skip and leap, the Lord wants that in us spiritually. That's the matter of taking this Christian journey, this life. The Christian life is not just about starting the journey, it's about continuing it all the way to the finish line. Now, that word that we've been looking at, live or walk, is a present active word, which gives us the reminder that it's supposed to be a continual motion, a continual activity, a continual growth in us spiritually. You see the equation up there on the screen, that faith plus action, that always needs to be true. Faith must be partnered with action in the Christian life. And we're going to get into that more later this morning as we see that belief that does not impact a person's life and behavior is really just plain useless. So as we continue in Colossians 2, Paul gets even more specific on what it looks to have a razor-sharp faith. In verse 7, we encounter 4 images or characteristics of what it means to live it out. So we'll go through those 4. Here's the first one. Being rooted in him. You see, just as in roots going down, our core must be strong and healthy. You see that in the beginning of Colossians 2, that we are to be rooted in him. It's the image of the tree. You go out and see trees, and they're beautiful, but we're only seeing part of the picture. We know what we see above the ground. There's all this network of roots that are going down deep into the ground. If the roots of a tree are deep and strong, then the whole tree will be healthy and fruitful. If the roots of a tree are weak or diseased or shallow, the whole tree is in great danger. I appreciate how the NLT translates this section. It says, let your roots grow down into him. The word let shows us that this is something that we're allowing the Holy Spirit to do in us. We need to have a sensitivity and an openness for the Spirit to be working in our lives. If we're cold to the work of God in our life, if we're cold to his challenge and correction and rebuke, then the roots are not going to be going down deep. The image of this is paralleled in Jeremiah. It's actually chapter 17 verse 8. It says here, he will be like a tree planted by the water that sends out its roots by the stream. In this image, it expresses Jeremiah's blessing on the one who trusts in the Lord and whose confidence is in him. So may your roots go down deep spiritually, having a stability and a firmness in your faith. A tree with deep roots can sustain the winds and pressures of this world, and the same goes for us spiritually. If our roots go down deep, we're going to be able to withstand the pressures of the world around us. We want deep roots. I wonder, what does your spiritual root base look like today? What's holding you up? What's feeding you? What are the roots that are feeding you? Now, Richard Foster has a classic book called Celebration of Discipline. Really love this book and would recommend it. The subtitle is The Path to Spiritual Growth. He does an excellent job of laying out how to build deep roots in our lives through the spiritual disciplines. And these are the very first words from his book. I love how he starts his book. He says this: spirituality or superficiality is the curse of our age. That's having shallow roots. The doctrine of instant gratification is a primary spiritual problem. The desperate need today is not for a greater number of intelligent people or gifted people, but for deep people. The classical disciplines of the spiritual life call us to move beyond surface living to the depths. They invite us to explore the inner caverns of the spiritual realm. So what are some practical words about being rooted, as Richard Foster has begun us to think about? Well, one is just to have that regular, consistent time with God where you're quiet before him. Reading your word, reading the Bible, but also making sure you're not coming in with your own agenda. You're not coming out with a rushed spirit. You come ready to hush your own list and hear what God has to say. Come eager to spend time in his word. This is the thing where I think sometimes we confuse what maybe we call devotions or quiet time or Bible reading. It's just a matter of like reading the Bible. That's a part of your quiet time. But really the big aspect is saying, I want to meet with God. It's a meeting with the Lord, a communion with him. And that's something we need to practice. That's really the base root system for building your faith. Now, along the ways, as we talked about, like Isaac moving from walking to skipping to jumping to doing cartwheels, spiritually, we need to start growing up in practicing some disciplines like that as well. And some of those, when we run a ministry for our high schoolers called Seniors Only. We actually met last night and had a meeting. We meet several times with these seniors. And one of the things we've built into them is a practice of doing some spiritual disciplines where we're trying to introduce them to some maybe deeper, really challenging, fruitful disciplines. Now, this last one, over the Christmas break, we challenged them to do a retreat of silence where they take about 2 to 3 hours and just go alone with the Lord, your Bible, and spend time in the Lord with prayer and reading. We've also done things like back in the fall, we did a group prayer and fasting time where we did a 2-meal fast, praying and fasting over where they're going to be going to college and selecting their major. We're also working on memorizing Psalm 103, 22 verses, Psalm 103. These are disciplines that help root us even more and more and deeper, and they're not just for seniors in high school. All of us can do these kinds of things on our own and with our families. We can also read books like Celebration of Discipline to learn more about the spiritual disciplines. But this is the first image of being rooted. The second image goes on in terms of what it means to live out to live it out is being built up in the Lord. This fact of that we are under continual construction, being made more and more like Christ. You see that in Colossians 2:7, where it says, being built up in him. It's in him, and that it's not some amazing work of our own, but it's against us allowing God to do this construction inside of us. And the image is of a building being constructed, adding on to the foundation that's there, just like adding on to the spiritual foundation of our lives. We as Christians are under construction. No, we should never be like, wow, I'm in a pretty good spot spiritually. We are continually under construction. It's the process of sanctification. So what are some practical ways that we can be doing this whole being built up? I think a big area is for us to consider our character and our attitude. And just be honest with that before the Lord. This past summer, we went through a series on the fruit of the Spirit. Maybe weekly, go through this fruit of the Spirit and just look at each one. How am I doing in terms of patience? How am I doing in all of these different fruits? Gentleness and kindness. How am I doing? Continuing to spend that time in God's Word, but opening yourselves. God, reveal to me areas that I need to be constructed. That I need work to take place. We pray for that. We pray for that. And realize that Christian growth and construction is not just a matter of reading the Bible and memorizing verses, but it's putting this stuff into action. I like this phrase that we've talked about on staff of building Christ-like habits, like Bible study. But to do that we're seeking to do that, to build Christ-like character. This goes to our third image of what it means to live it out. And the third one is to be strengthened. To be strengthened. It says to strengthen in the faith as you were taught. And the word strengthen has a meaning beyond what we're used to. A lot of times when we think of that word, it means to confirm, verify, and prove to be true. It gives an added force of confirming and verifying the strength of our faith by the way that we live. You see, in order to build a deep, strong faith, you have to prove it with your life. Think about it this way. If you want to build physical muscles, you need to get into a workout routine. Muscles are not just going to magically appear. Just going to the fitness club, like the Center Club, and sitting in the exercise room is not going to, you're not also like muscles pop up. You're not going to get ripped sitting in the steam room, okay, at your exercise place. And sometimes we get this warped view that we can grow spiritually just by reading about it or talking about it or going to church. Let me tell you straight up that today here in church, this is not your proving grounds. This is not where you're showing the Lord where you are at in terms of your spiritual growth. This is more like the rooted time or the building time. But the strengthened time, that comes the rest of the week and how you actually live for Christ. That is where you get your spiritual exercise and build up strong faith muscles for the Lord. I love this parallel passage in James 1:22 where James says, "Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says." It was our winter retreat theme for the high school group as we looked at James 1:22 and the theme of being a fanatic. The whole thing of faith plus action being absolutely necessary. Now, this leads us to our fourth and last image of what it means to live it out. It's to overflow in thankfulness. Love the image here of a glass, just pouring this glass, filling with thankfulness to the point that it's bubbling over, it's flowing over. So this attitude, this presence of thankfulness in our life splashes onto all the people around us. You know what that's like when you're around someone that's thankful and that's positive? That's just like you feel like, wow, I want to be positive too. I want to be thankful too. And we want that kind of attitude to overflow with thankfulness. This is our way, this is our opportunity to show the Lord and the world about around us the depth of traction that our faith has in our lives by being overflowing, by being upward focused and thankful to have that kind of attitude. So on one side of the blade of razor sharp faith, we have the three words, live it out. So if we go to the other side, the next three words may surprise you, but they're the words pass it on. So we have live it out, and the other side of the blade is pass it on. This process of growing and following is not to be taken in isolation. Yes, we have our personal faith, but it's not all about you. We are a body, and we are meant to be strengthened, encouraged, and challenged one another in community and in our families. When you look at the Old Testament passages like Deuteronomy 6, where we're going to be looking at the remainder of our time, you see this strong emphasis to pass it on. These verses shout out the whole aspect of faith conversation between the generations and passing down the faith from generation to the next, to the next, to the next. God directed Moses to teach the Israelites to know and obey these commandments that he had given on the mountain, and that included the 10 Commandments. And I want you to see the big connection of why him teaching it was so important. This comes from Deuteronomy 6, the first 2 verses. It says there, "These commands, decrees, and laws the Lord your God directed me to teach you to observe in the land that you are crossing to the Jordan to possess." Now check this. So that, what is the so that? Why was Moses instructed to teach them to the people? So that you, but not just you, your children, and your grandchildren, and we could keep going on down the list, that our descendants may fear the Lord by keeping all his commands. See, God directed Moses to teach commands not just so that the Israelites could get super smart and pass all the Bible trivia. It was so that it could be passed down the generations, and that each of these generations would actually follow and live out the commands, not just know them, but live them out. So as we focus our attention to Deuteronomy 6, verses 4 through 9 now, we're going to see that the Lord gives us several priorities on how to take our faith and pass it on. This is having the razor-sharp faith. So here's the first priority. The first priority is towards ourselves, to give wholehearted faith modeling. We need to model a faith that's worth following. Check this out in Deuteronomy 6:4. These verses are what's called part of the great Shema. It's a powerful passage. It's called Shema because that first word here is Shema in Hebrew. It says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." This is a summary of the 10 Commandments. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. We need to love God with our whole beings. And we're going to see that this theme comes out over the next coming verses, the whole thing of obeying the Lord, our love leading to obedience. Moses goes on to say in verse 6, "And you must commit yourselves wholeheartedly," I love that word, "wholeheartedly to these commands that I'm giving you today." Moses makes it clear that the law of God is to be upon your hearts than just merely on those tablets of stones that he received on the mountain. They're to be on our heart. That's how the NIV translates it. They're to be on our hearts. Obedience to the commandments is to be an outflow of love. Outflow of love. This is the kind of faith example our young people really need to see. This is the modeling that we need to give them. People that truly love God in this kind of way. Do you know that you are living a sermon with your life? This morning I'm preaching a sermon up here, but all of us today, all of us this week have opportunity to live a sermon that will be powerful and moving and inspiring for our younger for the younger generations to see and follow. Now we're going to see in the next 3 verses in Deuteronomy 6, Moses gives some focus on this question of how do we go about actually passing it on. We have the modeling aspect, but what are practical ways that we can pass it on? And Moses gets really practical here. And so we're going to continue on with the second priority of passing it on is this aspect of multi-generational faith sharpening. He says in verse 7, "Repeat them again and again, impress them on your children." The word used in NIV for impressed is the word sharpen, like sharpening an arrow. An arrowhead needs to be sharpened just like an axe does. And so do children. They need to be sharpened. They need some multi-generational sharpening taking place here in the church, here in our homes throughout the week. It's absolutely critical. We must do this as families, And we must do this as a whole church body. See this, if we have strong, growing adults, but our kids are disengaged, disinterested, and drifting from the faith, we are not cranking that well as a church. You may say, well, hey, I'm strong as a follower, but if our kids are not, we're not cranking that well. The health of this church, the health of your family, the health of us as individual followers of Christ can be seen on where our young people are at. Notice the repetition in this passage. Repeat them again and again. This is not a one-time, not a once in a while endeavor. There's a constancy to this teaching and conversation. Don't stop the multi-generational faith sharpening. Moses echoes this theme throughout this whole thing of the sharpening aspect. In Deuteronomy 4:9, we see this where he says, only be careful and watch yourselves closely so that you do not forget the things your eyes have seen and let them fade from your hearts as long as you live. Teach them to your children and to their children after them. So you kind of stop and you wonder, why is Moses so zoned in on this faith sharpening aspect? It's like he's kind of lock-brained on this. Well, I wonder if you kind of remember some things from what Pastor Todd has been talking as he's gone through Exodus and Deuteronomy the past several months. Anything that may jog your memory on why Moses would be concerned about them forgetting things, need to remember things, passing it on from generation to generation? I don't know, maybe this thing about going through the Red Sea and just like shortly after that, they're complaining again, or them getting manna and water, and they forget that, and they're complaining again. So Moses is like, these people, I got to keep reminding them. We got to pass this on. And this is our same pattern. Honestly, we are a slow and forgetful people. So together, we need to do a lot of multi-generational faith sharpening to keep our edge. Now catch this, this is not a role that you can delegate to other people. This is not something that you say, oh, the church is going to do that. That's what happens in Sunday school or youth group. This needs to be taking place in our church, but also in our homes and throughout the week, with parents taking the frontline role, but it needs to extend where we have other adults, other people that are influencing our kids in a positive way. Now, I'm going to fill you in on something you may not have realized here, okay? So you're going to really be thankful for me letting you know this. That if you are a follower of Jesus, you are by essence a volunteer in the children's ministry. You are by essence a volunteer in the youth ministry. You may say, hey, youth ministry, that's not me. You are. If you are a follower of Christ, you have a responsibility in whatever way that you have contact with kids and youth to influence them, to be a part of the sharpening of their lives. That's all of us, all of us. For me, as a youth pastor, my secret mission is to invest in the lives of young people and to see a wave of razor-sharp followers of Christ come up and lead Christ's church and radically impact and change this world that we live in for the gospel. That's my secret mission and what I'm all about in terms of faith sharpening. Well, let's go on to the third priority in terms of passing it on. We see this aspect of engaging faith conversations. Moses says here, talk about them, talk about these commandments, talk about the ways of God throughout all the day, when you're at home, when you're on the road, when you're going to bed, when you're getting up. The ways of God are to be the subject of conversation throughout all aspects of the day. Inside our home, outside our home, from the beginning of the day to the end of the day. They're to permeate every sphere of our lives and our families. Now, one resource that I want to provide you all today and highlight to you, and I think this will be on the screen, is a resource called Faith Conversations from Families. You can write this down. It's by Jim Burns. And he has a book that has 52 faith conversations that you can have that kind of range. They're probably not for like kids my age quite yet, but elementary through youth. And there's 52 of them. You can buy this book, but also, here's the little deal. There's a free one on the internet with 52 of them. And I have a copy of this out at the welcome table that you can take for your family. And there's a website placed on there where you can find these. It's at homeward.com is the website. They have 52 faith conversations. Actually, the opening illustration I gave in terms of the 70-year-old, how you spend time, they have one of these. It's called Getting Your Priorities Straight, and that's where this faith conversation begins. And there's some conversation starters, and then there's a Bible passage with questions to look at. These are neat opportunities, resources for us to be involved in this kind of faith conversation with our families, but engaging because we don't want them to be like boring, because that's not the kind of faith that we want to pass on to our kids. We want to engage in these conversations throughout. Just notice the expansiveness. This is not something that's limited to our time at church on Sunday mornings, but our faith conversations need to happen in all types of settings. I broke it down in terms of a wherever and a whenever. Wherever, taking advantage of various places that we have to teach our kids, from conversations at home around the dinner table. Hey, how did your day go? To times when we're driving to and from places throughout the week. Do you know when you're driving your kids in the car, like they are a captive audience. They're like there and they can't leave. So we have a time to like just talk about teachable moments, what's been going on today, or you see something and you just bring up, you hear a song on the radio, you talk about it. To travels on family vacations, to taking advantage of those. One of the things that I'm looking forward to is when we go on road trips, picking out like audio books, maybe something like the Chronicles of Narnia, and listening to that. I know Focus on the Family has resources too, like the Adventures in Odyssey, and like using things, times like the trips to have those conversations. The whenever, taking advantage of different times of the day to teach our kids, from conversations in the morning as the kids wake up. You know, that can kind of be a rough time of the day, but you know, hey, what are you looking for today? To chats at bed. I love these, like being in my kids' bedroom and just all of a sudden they start chitter-chattering and having those faith conversations with them at nighttime. Some other ones that I had, at bedtime, just saying, if you're kind of like, what am I supposed to do? Just talk about an easy one is say, what was your high of the day? What was your low of the day? And use that as an entry point to get involved in a faith conversation. In the morning time, it's awesome when your kids come up, and if you're up before them, to see that you've been reading your Bible, you've had that time with God. That's an awesome thing for our younger people to see. That, hey, the adults actually are like talking with God. And then maybe you are able to do a family devotion with your family also at breakfast time or sometime during the day. Let these faith conversations permeate throughout the day. Look for opportunities and then take them. The next priority is to have vibrant faith reminders. We see this in verse 8 where it talks about tying them on your hands and wearing them on your foreheads as reminders. Now, this doesn't mean that you literally need to have stuff tied on your hands and written on your forehead. Some Pharisees got confused on that and had these things called phylacteries and all that. They took what was a vibrant faith tradition and reminders and made it into just religiosity, and Jesus rebuked them for that. But what we need to do is look for ways that we build faith reminders throughout the day, throughout the week, that our kids and our younger people can see and that we see also. I think of simple things like sharing meals together, and at your meals, praying together as a family. I love seeing that when I'm out at a restaurant and see a family praying together. Just them showing like to their kids, this is a reminder that we are a people of faith. Putting a priority on family devotions. I think we have a slide where some of these are on there. Having family worship time together. Sharing what I call God sightings. We do this in the youth group where we say, at retreats, we'll just say, hey, tell us about how God has been moving in your life. Doing that as a family. Having family reading interesting books like Chronicles of Narnia or Lord of the Rings. Okay, that's not for like the preschoolers, but you know what I mean. Watching faith-related movies like Soul Surfer. There's other good ones that have been coming out. Watch for those. Serving together, building traditions around the holidays. In our family, we have an Advent book that we go through during the Advent season. These are vibrant faith reminders and traditions that show that are passing the faith on. And then finally, the last one here, in terms of priorities, is to have a visible family identity. You see this in verse 9 where it says, write them on the doorpost of your house and on your gates. In the 21st century, you can be like, what in the world is that about? How are you supposed to write something on the doorposts of your house? Am I supposed to get the paint out? But to me, this is just making your faith a visible part of your family identity. That your kids know that we are a family that follows the Lord. The people of this church, that's the porch of our families. Whether you're single, married, wherever, that you have that kind of identity. And some things that you might think about practically is to take something like a family mission statement or family values that are based around godly values and adopt them as a family. You know, in our house, we have a little board that has our family values, and they're up on the wall, and our kids see them and we talk about them. It's a way to make visible family identity. So people enter your home, they know, wow, this is a family that's following the Lord. This is the kind of faith that we want to build. This is the faith that we want to prioritize. Not a dull faith, but a razor-sharp faith. A faith that lives it out and a faith that passes it on. We must commit to that, to communicate and to live out a razor-sharp faith for the world and for our younger people, for the younger generations to see. See, this is the kind of faith that we need to pass on. And this is the kind of faith that will survive and pass from generation to generation. A razor-sharp faith. Let's pray together. Oh, Heavenly Father, we desire this kind of faith. But we know it's not something we can just will within ourselves. It's a work that we need to say, Holy Spirit, come. Come, help us be rooted, help us be strengthened, help us be built up. Help us to have that attitude of thankfulness, God, and help us to pass this faith on good and well to the coming generations. God, we pray for razor-sharp faith. Oh, Lord God, we love you so much. We pray this in your name. Amen.